You are listening to That Big CEO Energy, where we talk all things business, life, marriage to create an impactful community, teaching you how to lead your life and your business with compassionate strength. It can be scary stepping out from the barriers we still carry while we were once employees and change the narrative to take charge of your business and team. This podcast is a place for you to come to learn to do just that. From personal experiences, interviewing new friends, I hope that you will tune in to listen all that living that big CEO energy can offer you and your business. I'm your host, Callie, entrepreneur and fractional COO. Let's jump in. I feel like the buzzword that is circumventing the internet right now, or buzzwords for that matter, is imposter syndrome. And I am just going to flat out say this, that imposter syndrome doesn't exist like we think that it is. And so today I want to talk a little bit about what imposter syndrome is and what it's not, and why we really need to get rid of the phrase imposter syndrome. So what it is, right? By text definition, it is defined as doubting your abilities and feeling like a fraud. And imposter syndrome often shows up a little bit like having the inability to realistically assess your competence and skills. And maybe you're attributing your success to external factors by berating your performance, or just overall fear that you won't live up to your own expectations or even expectations of others. Likely this is overachieving, sort of self-sabotaging your success, self-doubt, and setting up very challenging goals for yourself and then feeling disappointed when you fall short. So through those things where it's showing up like that, for some people, imposter syndrome can feel feelings of motivation to achieve. Usually in most senses comes at a cost in the form of constant anxiety and constant worry. And there are probably times where you're over preparing or you're working much harder than necessary to make sure, right, quote unquote, make sure that nobody finds out that you're a fraud. And it's this terrible, vicious cycle that sets you up in which you think that the only reason you survived, that presentation or that Clubhouse talk or showing up on somebody's Instagram was that you stayed up all night rehearsing. Or it's this constant, in the back of your mind, well, when they say this, I'm going to say that. If the conversation veers this way, then I'm going to reposition myself this way. Or you just think that the only reason why you got through, the party or the family gathering was that you memorized details about all the people showing up so that you would always have ideas for small talk. I remember when I would go to Chamber of Commerce things and, you introduce yourself and you always have sort of that period of time where they say, get out your business cards. We're going to have the exercise of getting to know each other. And so you go out and you scan the room and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, what if people don't think that I am legit? What if people don't think that I have credibility here? And so I remember I would sit in my chair and I would look over the room and I would pick out things to introduce myself. So if it was a girl with particular colored hair, I would find myself easy to go and say, hi, my name is Kelly. Oh, by the way, I love your hair. And that would spark the conversation. And then it was easy for me to feed in. I never found myself sort of cold showing up to people and being like, oh my gosh, hey, let's talk about the things, right? Let's get down to business, dirty, dirty business. And it just became this vicious cycle that I found myself in. And then when I didn't have people to pick out things, or maybe the crowd was just a little bit bland, I would get anxious because I couldn't pick out things to have conversation starters. And so I always relied on that. And now looking back on it, like, what amount of people did I miss out on? Right? What are the opportunities that I potentially could have missed out on? And we don't necessarily want to live in the past either, but it was just for a cause of realization of I couldn't start a conversation without having a tangible thing in front of me to spark that conversation. And so if that's something that you struggle with too, we can talk about that a little bit later. But how do you really know intrinsically if what you have is imposter syndrome or if it's just a lack of knowledge on how you operate or things that potentially show up that you need to address? Because that's the real conversation. Those are the conversations that I want to have with you today is it's not necessarily always this imposter syndrome that we think it is. If you think you have imposter syndrome, it's likely just the redirection that you need to give yourself and tangible things that you need to reframe in your mind to help you understand that it's because of things that have happened to you or past motivations that you have had that need to be reframed. So, how do you really know if it's imposter syndrome? If you agonize over the smallest mistakes or flaws in your work, or attribute your success to outside factors, or your lack of success to outside factors, or maybe you're very sensitive to constructive criticism, or you feel like inevitably you will be found out as a phony, and maybe if you downplay your own expertise, even in areas where you genuinely are more skilled than others, sometimes that shows up as a blanket statement of saying, well, I can't do that because I have imposter syndrome. That's not true. There are multiple factors that contribute to this sort of blanket statement of imposter syndrome, which are your family upbringing. If you have to have this constant feeling of having high achievements within your family, or maybe your family really prides themselves on accolades, or even if you've had or do have overprotective or even controlling parents, that is not something that has to do with imposter syndrome. That is something that has been ingrained in you, which creates a framework for what you are accomplishing right now and how you show up for yourself right now. And potentially, if you're a person that has had multiple job changes in a short period of time, even if they have been for good, there is sort of this idea that we're no good. Even if they are positive changes, right? Even if you're leaving for more money, or even if you're leaving because the job description is no longer what you thought it would be, or this next position positions yourself in a way that allows you more growth. There still is this subconscious thing that happens where potentially deep down you say to yourself, well, ultimately it's because I wasn't good enough here, or they didn't pay me what I was worth. Do you see how having multiple job changes, whether it be good or bad, can really affect this quote unquote imposter syndrome? But I challenge you to say, is it truly imposter syndrome in this area? Or is it because you have the lack of your own internal knowledge of why you're making those changes, whether they be good or bad? And where does that stem from? If you have a personality of perfectionism or have high anxiety, which is including like social anxiety, oftentimes we misconstrue like, oh, well, that's imposter syndrome. And I caution you to use the words with yourself as imposter syndrome with the idea of perfectionism, high anxiety, social anxiety, things like that. Because it's not necessarily imposter syndrome. It's literally just you not understanding your communication style. It's not understanding if it's in the realm of perfectionism. It's not understanding why you are the way you are and why done is never good enough for you. That is a cause for you to look deep inside and saying, what are the contributing factors here? And maybe it relates directly back to your family upbringing, right? Maybe it relates to being in a shitty job where your boss is consistently telling you that this isn't good enough. Go back and rewrite it. Go back and figure out a different way. I want, 6 different ways on my desk by 5 p.m. And here you are trying to build this anxiety-ridden self by just accomplishing what that other person means. when they say go back to the drawing board. When someone outwardly addresses you to make sure that you are on a high profile perfectionism, that has nothing to do with you. That has everything to do with them. And so when you internalize that, and when you take that on, that is not giving you imposter syndrome. That is giving you a recipe for allowing people to manipulate you, to make you believe that if you are not a perfectionist, you will not succeed. So I really want you, as we walk through sort of these things that I'm talking about, to write these down and really highlight, make some side notes on, is this me? Am I showing up this way? Can I relate to this? And how do I change it? Because just simply showing up and saying, oh yeah, I have imposter syndrome, that doesn't mean anything. That means that you're not doing anything about it, quite frankly, that you're not recognizing what the actual issues are so that you can do something about it. And then ultimately, you're just giving yourself an excuse to keep on keeping on. And if that's what you're here for, you can go ahead and shut this off and we'll move right on without you. But if you're here because you're like, why am I showing up this way? Then let's keep talking. So when you think about all of this and how it relates to you as a CEO of your own company or small business, what kind of triggers is this information sending your way? Is this true imposter syndrome, or is this just a lack of knowing yourself? Let's explore that a little bit more. When I say lack of knowledge of yourself, what does that mean to you? If you're taking notes, write it down. What does it mean? Let's reflect back to what I just talked about. If you're feeling like I just exposed you, that likely means that there are certain areas of yourself that you didn't know create this thing called imposter syndrome. So I'd like to touch on that. Most times when we talk about imposter syndrome, when we say she has imposter syndrome because she is backing out or is scared to jump in, that usually means that there is something that she doesn't know about herself, or that you don't know about yourself, that there is something deep inside that has not been fully developed or researched so that you feel comfortable jumping into something feet first. So how do you know if it's just lack of knowledge about yourself rather than having this quote unquote true imposter syndrome? Let's take a deeper dive into the questions that we mentioned earlier. Do you agonize over even the smallest mistakes or flaws in your work? Why? If it's perfectionism, do you feel like being perfect is better than done? Did you grow up in a family that had pride on accolades? Did you have siblings that would race and are also high performing? Or do you have a fear that you will fail or that no one will buy what you are selling if it isn't just perfect? Research that. Why are you telling yourself that perfect is better than done? Most times on social media, this is where this comes into play. You see it over and over and over again, the perfect curated picture, the perfect caption. When you go to that person's page and you download the freebie, it's sent right away. How on earth did they make that happen? And why can't I get that? And most of the time, when you journal about that, you really start to find out that most of those things, they have a team behind them, okay? They have a team that is curating those things, make no mistake. If you're in a position where you think you might need a team of people, reach out to me. I know some people. But if you are really feeling like if there is a mishap and you feel like the world is just come crashing down, why won't something just work right? Why can't I just get this to work in the first try? Most importantly, when that feelings comes up, you need to acknowledge it, but you also need to find ways to combat it. Start to look at yourself from an outside perspective. When people see you on social media, are they seeing you? Are they seeing the deep work that you are putting into your business, or do they see all the afters? Can you reframe perfectionism to show up with your mistakes and allow your ideal client to show up with theirs? Because most times that's what we're missing. When everything is topical, When we show up to people's feeds and it's just pretty pictures of their houses and we never see the messes behind the scenes, oftentimes they expect you to show up with everything in a cute little bow too. And you know you're messy. I'm messy. She's messy. We're all messy. People like the mess. As much as social media has portrayed us to make us think that it all needs to be perfect in a cute little bow, deep down, we really crave the mess. And so when you put yourself in a little box of perfectionism, what does that say? When you agonize over the smallest mistakes or flaws in your work, what are you telling people? That they need to be that too? But don't you crave the human connection? Don't you love it when people show up with a story? When they show up with their mess and that you can walk beside them? That's what I want out of my clients. I want them to show up with the mess because you know what? My job is to untangle the mess and walk beside them. And so if I can't show up that way, if I'm having a hard time showcasing the mess because of my perfectionism, that's not imposter syndrome. That's just some inner deep work that I need to do to release that. Moving on. Do you attribute your success to luck or outside factors? Do you not feel like you're deserving? Why? You have worked so hard to get here. Is it because you have just done things on a wing and a prayer halfway and your success is just because you were a peasant? I love when I'm like, oh, I'm just going to do this on a wing and a prayer because that's what peasants do. Maybe it is time to spend that time researching on what it is and how you can get more knowledge in those areas so you feel more confident when you speak on what it is that you are trying to sell or teach. You know, a lot of it is when we come up with an idea in our business and when we attribute success to just having luck and being at the right place at the right time, and we're not truly acknowledging that we are smart, most of the time that doesn't show up as confidence when you are speaking on what it is you're trying to sell or trying to teach. When you aren't super passionate, but when you have a product or you have a teachable moment or an idea that you know within your being that you are an A++ player on, then you have all the confidence in the world to try and sell and teach that. And I don't say the word try as in like, you might make it or you might not. I say try as in like, try to develop your inner being so much so that when you say what it is that you are selling and teaching, you can do that with very few words because people will drink from your knowledge because it is you that they are asking for. It's not always necessarily the thing, but it's you. So when you show up and you have this quote unquote imposter syndrome that you like to say that you have, people notice that. People will notice your lack of confidence. People will also then try and use that to manipulate you so that you don't feel confident in selling or teaching whatever it is that you are offering. So moving on to the third question, are you very sensitive to even constructive criticism? So are you sending out the surveys at the end of your classes? If you're not sending out the surveys at the end of your classes or at the end of your accelerators or whatever you want to call them, why? Is it because you don't want people telling you their real thoughts of your class or your product or whatever you have going on? Is it because you don't want people to really address the elephant in the room? Why? Why don't you send out those surveys? I'll tell you why. It's because you are very sensitive to constructive criticism. You really don't want to know the truth because with the truth, it creates action because now you have to do something about it. You either have to A, look at the constructive criticism, or sometimes it's just straight criticism, and throw it in the trash and say, well, that person is not my ideal client, so I'm good with that. Or if it's true, valuable, constructive criticism where they're like, you know what? I loved this part, but I wish I had just a few more nuggets. I wish I had just a little more in this area in XYZ. That's very good, tangible information that you can go back to your drawing board and be like, should I include that? Are the other 5 people giving me the same type of feedback? Like, that is good. Why are you missing out on that? Just from fear. Because that's exactly what it is. And so I want you to really, if this is you, if this is the one thing through this whole entire podcast that you were like, you know what? I do not send out surveys because I am fearful. I want you to create a survey and send it out to all of your clients that you have, past, present, and attach it to all of your exit emails that people get when they complete a class. And the reason for that is you have to start thinking outside of the box. You have to start moving forward, and you can only move forward if you allow other people to help you. And this is one way to help you. So truly, if this is the only thing you get, and I know I'm repeating myself, send out the dang survey. Ask people within your community of like, hey, can you just look this over and see if this sounds right or if it looks good? Because you know what? Behind every entrepreneur is a community of people that just wants to love on them. So why are you not letting them love on you? It's because you don't have the knowledge of where this is coming from. If you deep down are like, constructive criticism, girl, you're out. Bye. Turning this off before you go listen to this. Where's that coming from? Is it because your parents, every single time that you would do something, would be like, yeah, but it could be better. Yeah, I mean, good, but also not super great. Or that sucks. Like, why do you do that? That's awful. Because you know what? You're paving your own lane. You're making your own way. And so what if somebody tells you that your stuff is trash? So what? Then that's not for them. It's for you and the other people that will come and devour it and be like, this is the best thing ever. Because you know what? We're all created different. We all need different things. We all are hoping for someone else to help us out in a different way. That doesn't mean that what you are doing in this moment is trash. That just means that if somebody is showing up and saying, you know what, I really love this product. I just wish I had a little more of this. Maybe you can give them a little more of that. Maybe you didn't give them a little more of that because, kicker, you had this crazy thing that you were deeming imposter syndrome where you're like, meh, nobody wants that. Nobody's gonna want that. And yet that's the same thing that they are showing up in the survey telling you that they want. Friends, if you are in a space where you don't like constructive criticism, then you better just hang up your entrepreneur hat and go home. Go home. Go live it out in corporate world. Because you know what? That's also where constructive criticism, quote unquote, I could go on a whole another podcast, and I'm gonna just end this little question with, is it imposter syndrome or is it your lack of knowledge on where it is rooted in? Next question. Do you feel like you will inevitably be found out as a phony? What is a phony? It truly is someone who is trying to sell somebody else's shit and market as their own. Now, if you're doing that, then you are a phony and you need to go get a life. But I'm pretty sure a lot of the people that are on this podcast are not like that. So that is not for you. But why do you feel like that? If you have a good product and you are passionate and you have a teaching moment and you are passionate that you really feel like you could help people, then don't feel like a phony. I want you to step out of that zone and to really write down why, like, what is the definition of phony to you? It's someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, right? It's someone who literally strips every piece of content from someone else and positions it as their own. That's a phony. It's a phony who doesn't believe a word that is coming out of their mouths. If you don't believe a word that is coming out of your mouth, that is a whole other issue that, girl, you need to go get some therapy and you need to love on yourself a little bit more. But if you are knowledgeable, in the things that you are selling and you're not stripping other people's content, then you literally just need to find out, instead of being a phony, like, what are the areas that you can continue to grow in? Maybe it's public speaking, right? Maybe the fear of feeling like a phony is because your public speaking skills just need to be tweaked a little bit. Or maybe you feel like a phony because you're using email templates. Well, maybe it's time to go find a copywriter who can really develop your true authentic voice and position yourself in a way that you don't feel like that. Right? There are tangible things that you can do to make it feel like you are not out there like just selling trash and hoping to God that you collect a paycheck. And it's not truly because you have this imposter syndrome. It's truly because you honestly are just sort of doing this whole entrepreneur thing, not really knowing where to reach out or who to find help through, or, oh my gosh, it's super overwhelming and I just don't know how to do the thing. Well, honey, it's trying to make a list of like the areas, right? So if you have a piece of paper out right now, or if you don't, go get one. But in your business, if there are areas where you're like, I don't feel like this is strong enough because XYZ, and I don't think people will buy this because XYZ, I need to XYZ. Whether it's I need to find a copywriter, I need to find a business coach, I need to find someone who can get me out of this process of making myself feel like I'm trash. Because that's not imposter syndrome. That is you just honestly not knowing what the next step is, or not knowing basically how to do the little nuggets within your business that honestly somebody else should be doing. Like, you shouldn't be doing it all. You should have a little mini team of people, or reach out on Fiverr or whatever that is, so that you can have things that relate to you. Sometimes it's stepping out 500 feet from your business or from yourself and saying, what are the things that I need? And part of that is if you are downplaying your own expertise, even in areas where you are genuinely more skilled than others, that's a cause for concern. That is a cause for, honey, you need to go get some therapy or go get a business coach where you are really working in those areas of expertise and blowing them up and saying, okay, this is exactly what I know for sure. This is exactly where my expertise lies. Now, these other areas, I also know things in them, but maybe this is a learning curve for me. Maybe these are the areas that I need to set up goals for the year, that I need to learn a little bit more so that I can become and feel more like an expert. The point of all this is to really help you understand that this is not imposter syndrome. All of these thoughts, all of these feelings that we all have, these are not imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is a blanket statement that we like to give for not doing some self-realization. It's the blanket statement that we like to provide people as the reason why we're not doing the necessary things. I say this all in love, truly. And I say this because this was a huge barrier that I had to overcome over the last year. When I first started my business, I really began thinking to myself, can I do this? And I started self-sabotaging. And this started even well before Clubhouse. I had a position where I had a few clients on the side from my corporate job. And I really knew deep down that I wanted to be an OBM, eventually this fractional COO. And I didn't know how to do it. And the reason why I didn't know how to do it is because I was too busy giving myself excuses like, I'm not good enough. I will feel like a phony. What does this have to do with me going to college and getting a degree anyway? What if I don't make it? What if I show up and all my family and friends think I'm crazy for having this idea? What will my mom think? What will my family think if I just want to hang out at home and work and not go into an office? Will I be able to provide for my daughter? What will my daughter think? Will she think that there's no value on education because I just spent 5 years of her life going to school. And the real answer was I was just showing up and giving myself excuses because I wasn't doing the actual work of putting the pieces together, creating a platform, figuring out what I needed to do as far as a website and what are all the things that I need to do. How do I reach out to clients? How do I find these things? I wasn't doing any of that, but what I was fully capable and proud to be doing is saying, well, I can't do that because I just have imposter syndrome and I'm so scared. And I realized that when I started doing the inner work, when I started putting the pieces together of, okay, this is what I want to do. What don't I know about this? Well, I don't know how to put together a contract. Okay, need to find someone there. I don't know what the legalities or the cost will be. Okay, need to research there. I don't know where my ideal client is. Okay, need to research there. What will I even offer them? Okay, let's go through and let's make a list of literally everything that you do in your corporate job. What are the things you like doing? How do you help your corporate people? And do you like doing that? You don't have to have it all figured out, but at least starting to ask the questions so that you can start putting away and shelling off some of the quote unquote imposter syndrome that happens. And the negative self-talk really is what we're talking about here. When we start sort of setting those things away and paving the way for us to accomplish these things, that's when the true growth happens. That's when you become so knowledgeable and so confident in whatever it is that you're selling or teaching that there is no room for someone or outside people or family or whoever that is to step in and go, you're not good enough. Because then you turn around and you look them in the face and you say, not only am I good enough, I'm the best at what I do. And not only am I the best at what I do, I'm going to show you, I'm going to document it with pictures, and I'm going to make you think twice. Because they are showing up with their own lack of knowledge, because they have no idea who you are, who you came to serve. And quite frankly, even in your family, they're not your ideal client. So why are they so worried about it? So here I am, showing up in a space where I am loving on you and saying to you, and if there is nothing in this world that you hear, I am here to walk beside you and say this. You are worth it. You are more powerful than you think. And if you will just retrain your mind and push aside anything that the devil is trying to put in you and start teaching yourself not only how to climb out, but gain confidence in to then be the big CEO energy that you've always dreamed about, there's a whole other world for you. There's a whole other world for you, not in social media, not with your clients that you have or that you want to have. There's a whole other world for you because you are worth it. And the more you work on yourself now, the easier other things will come. Thanks for listening to That Big CEO Energy. If you heard something today that helped you, I would love it if you would leave a review and share it with your friends. This helps more people like you become inspired just like you are. If you would like to learn more about how I can help you streamline and position your business for growth or lead your business as a CEO, feel free to jump into the show notes with all of the links to find me. And don't forget to head over to Instagram so we can be pals.